In this part of the lecture, I would like to explain the role of underwriters. So, who are underwriters? Think about a company that wants to sell shares of stock to investors. Does it do that directly? No. It does it using the services provided by underwriters or an underwriter. So a company would sell new securities to the underwriter, and then the underwriter will then forward those and sell them to the investors. So underwriters are important intermediaries in selling firms' securities, such as stocks and bonds, in a public offer. In other words, to the general public. What is the main role? For example, the underwriter will ask the company, okay, how much money would you like to raise with the new shares of stock? Okay, let's go from that number, say $500 million, and see how many shares of stock would need to be sold. And we don't want it to be a small number of shares, because that would make each of them very expensive. So the underwriter will help the company determine how many shares would need to be sold, what the best price would be. Also, would the shares of stock be sold in some sort of an auction setting or a different environment? So that's what the underwriter does. Um, Underwriting is an important line of business of investment banks. You might recognize all these different names: Citigroup, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, Deutsche Bank. These are all very famous investment banks whose important role has always been underwriting. Syndicate is when a group of investment banks um, are involved in selling shares of stock or additional corporate bonds for some company. So they are grouped together because, in combination, they would each face a small amount of risk if any amount of securities do not get sold. So they share the risk associated with selling the stock issue for some company. Services, once again, they formulate the method used to issue stocks or bonds. So is it going to be an auction or not an auction? Then they also help determine the right price for the securities. What is gross spread? Gross spread is like the difference between the price that all sold stock shares generate and how much the firm that sold the securities actually receives. In other words, it's a fee. It's nothing but a fee, but that the company owes to the underwriter for all of these services, also known as the underwriting discount. So it could be something around 5 to 10% of the amount of money that all shares of stock altogether are sold for. And of course, the underwriter is the one actually selling the financial securities in the market. There are three ways how an underwriter can sell financial securities for a firm, sell shares of stock for a firm: firm commitment underwriting, best efforts underwriting, and Dutch auction underwriting. What is firm commitment underwriting? The main idea is the underwriter is the one that bears all the risk of potentially not being able to sell all the shares of stock at the price that was agreed upon with the company. What happens is the company sells all shares of stock to the underwriter. So the underwriter basically pays a lot of money to the firm, and the firm is done. The firm got the money. Maybe it's a little bit less than how much it wanted because of the fee, the gross spread, right? And then it's the underwriter's role to sell all of those shares further to the general public. And so there is a chance that there is not enough interest in the shares, not all of them get sold, or the price needs to be reduced. In other words, there is a chance that the underwriter will actually lose money. This is the most common type of underwriting in the United States. The second type of underwriting is called best efforts underwriting. Like the name implies, the underwriter does its best, the best it can, to sell all the shares at the price agreed upon with the company. And so this time it's the company that bears the risk of the shares not being sold, right? So maybe the underwriter says, okay, I will sell all these shares for you. I will get 5% of the amount of money that they would all sell for, which is, let's say, $10 million. So it receives $10 million from the company. But the problem is the shares have not been sold yet. So there is a chance that there is not enough interest. They don't sell for the expected amount of money. And so the firm essentially already paid the fee, but did not sell enough shares that would sort of reflect the fee that has been paid. And for this reason, this has not been a common type of underwriting in the United States. The third way how shares of stock could be sold through underwriter services is called Dutch auction underwriting. So the underwriter accepts a series of bids from investors who are interested, and each bid shows two things: how many shares the bidder would like to buy and how much he would like to pay for each share. The key part of this type of auction is that the price that would be used to sell every single one of the shares is the one that will make everybody happy, all bidders happy. Let's see how this works in the following example. Let's say a company would like to sell 600 shares of stock in the initial public offering market. So it would like to sell shares of stock for the very first time. And it makes sense that the Dutch auction underwriting would be popular for an IPO, because IPO is selling shares for the very first time. It could be that this company's business is so new, there are no peers in the market that would allow us to determine at what price shares would sell. And so the best way to sell is see what the investors are willing to pay. In other words, through some type of an auction. Anyway, let's say there are 6 bidders who are interested in these 600 shares that are available for sale, for purchase. Bidder A would like to buy 200 shares and pay $18 for each. Bidder B would like to buy 100 shares and pay $16. Same goes for bidder C. The fourth guy would like to buy 160 shares and pay $15 for each. E would like 240 shares and pay $13 for each. And F would like 300 shares and pay $12 for each. 2 questions. At which price will these 600 shares be sold? And how many shares will each bidder be able to buy? Let's start with the first question. It's the same table, and notice that the bidders are ranked by the price in the last column, by the price that they would like to pay per share. The first thing we can do is start counting the number of shares, starting bidder number 1, bidder A, who is willing to pay the highest price for each share. 200, then another 100, then another 100, then 160. We are now at 560. and we have 40 shares remaining. So clearly, bidder E will make the cut because he wants to buy more than 40 shares. So with bidder E included, all 600 shares that the company would like to sell will definitely get sold. F failed because the price is too low. That's why he did not make the cut. So which investors will be able to buy the stock? All but the last one. A, B, C, D, and E. F is not going to be one of them. At which price? So do we say that 200 shares will be sold to A at $18 each and so on? No. Remember, the price has to be, let's go back here. The highest price that will result in all shares being sold. What's the highest price? For example, would E be willing to pay $18? No. Would E be willing to pay $16? No. 15? No. Only 13, right? In other words, the only price that would make this transaction possible is the lowest one of all. The lowest one that we see for the last bidder that made the cut, $13 per share. Next, second question. How many shares will each investor be able to buy? So everything needs to be sort of fair to every single bidder that made the cut. So altogether, if you do the math, how many shares all top 5 bidders would like to purchase, it adds up to 800 shares, right? And how many are available? 600 shares, which was given. So what we're going to do is say that each bidder will receive only 75% of the shares that he originally wanted, which is calculated by taking the total that's available, kind of the supply, and dividing by the total that there is a demand for, the total demand, 800. So 600 divided by 800 gives 75%, which means that bidder A would get 75% of 200 shares that he wanted, which is 150. Bidder B would receive 75% of 100 shares that he wanted, and same goes for C because they have the same numbers. D will get 75% of 160 shares, which is 120. E will get 75% of 240 shares, which is 180. And F will get, that's right, F will get nothing because he did not make the cut. And it's a good it's a good idea to check your math at this point. What should you get if you add the number of shares that each of the qualifying bidders would be able to buy? You should get exactly $600, which is all that the firm is selling at this point.